Conspiracy theories that led to vaccine hesitancy threaten to derail the South African government's target of achieving herd immunity against COVID-19 by the end of 2021. With more on this, we're now joined via Zoom by Dr. Njeri Mwagiru, who's a senior futurist at the Institute of Futures Research at the University of Stellenbosch Business School in the Western Cape. And she's here to explain why it's imperative for government to work hard at rebuilding public trust in public institutions and systems. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be joining you for this conversation.
All right, so tell us about your concerns about the need to start rebuilding trust. What have you seen that's prompted you to think along these lines?
Yes, so we have been at the Institute for Futures Research. Part of our work is to scan the current environment to try to make sense of the various events that are occurring and happening around us. And as part of this work, we have been interested to also track the current growth and popularity of conspiracy theories, specifically around vaccine hesitancy, but also in general in terms of conspiracy theories as particular kinds of narratives that drive action and that shape our societies and futures going forward. So some of the concerns that our environmental scanning has brought to light is the fact that there seems to be a declining level of trust in public institutions and in leadership. And this may be one of the causal reasons or motivations for the current traction and the attraction to conspiracy theories that we're seeing quite broadly in many contexts.
What do you think causes the lack of trust? Is it that you see a commission of inquiry into state capture on television every day? Is it that you constantly hear news of one department misspending? What is it that causes the distrust in the first instance?
That's a great question and a very broad question as well. From the particular exploration around conspiracy theories, we know that historically conspiracy theories tend to gain traction during times of uncertainty and when there are rapid shifts and a sense of the unknown. And I do believe that the COVID-19 pandemic fits this description of a context quite well. But other than that, other causal issues that are related to a lack of trust or a growing lack of trust is a lack of accountability, a lack of transparency, and perhaps a lack of engagement with evidence-based information and knowledge to give a broader sense of what's happening with the pandemic and lend some certainty in these very uncertain times.
So what are some of the things that the authorities and these institutions can do to start winning back the public?
I definitely think that speaking more to the democratic ideals that I know very many, particularly in Africa, African countries are striving towards as part of the Agenda 2063 aspirations is a very good step. So we need to see more engagement of public institutions and leadership with our populaces in a way that extends beyond the immediate expediency, for instance, of publicity campaigns that show leadership taking the vaccines. We need to see sustained actions that generate our trust in these institutions and establishments and that enable us to believe that they will work towards the collective good in terms of the work and the agendas that they are prioritizing.
But I've been watching from day one. We were quite impressed with the way that President Ramaphosa was leading from the front throughout the whole COVID story. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize has been saying the right things, doing the right things. Why would there be doubt about the process when it seems, on the face of it, we were doing everything that we could?
That's a great question, and this is one of the questions that has inspired us to explore this current phenomenon of conspiracy theories a bit closer. And I think one of the relational issues that we could speak about is the fact that historically within African countries, we have seen unethical behavior, specifically by big pharma, but also in terms of scientific experimentation and research. So historically, there is a precedence to have some of this distrust. It's not completely unfounded, but at the same time, we would hope that as we move forward into more democratized societies, and that as our governance institutions move towards more good governance, that we would see more trust in our institutions and in our establishments. But unfortunately, this is not the case. And this is why it's interesting to explore why conspiracy theories continue to have such traction.
And I would imagine the amount of PPE scandals, supplier scandals, did not help the situation at all.
Not at all. Conspiracy theories tend to thrive in situations of a lack of trust, and they also tend to thrive in situations where they can speak to events that are occurring, which is why they're so relatable. So when we have incidences that raise questions around how public resources are being distributed, how accountability and transparency around public resources is being demonstrated, then this definitely doesn't help the conspiracy theory situation. What we would like to see is events and incidences, moments of continued building of trust with the public, and to sustain our belief that the leadership that represents us will stand for our best interests and do what's right for the long term and not just the short term, and also not for partisan interests, but for collective interests.
Could some of this also just be about perceptions, that there's actually no reason to distrust, but just that for whatever reason, people just think that it's not a trustworthy environment?
Absolutely. And this is what the research that is delving more into this phenomenon of conspiracy theories is finding. We're seeing that there are emerging patterns of conspiracy thinking, conspiracy mindsets. So I think it's a field of study that would be interesting to explore further. But definitely, I think that institutions such as the media and education institutions as well have a role to play, so that individuals have the requisite tools of discernment, critical thinking, analytical thinking, evidence-based solution finding, ethical research. And I think there's different ways that we can begin to respond to this tendency to believe false narratives more than to believe the official line. I do feel it's an important issue to address.
We live in the world of fake news, and I wonder sometimes if there aren't people that are actually working deliberately, maybe for political gain or otherwise, to peddle these stories, to create this confusion and raise the distrust. Could that be playing out?
Yes, unfortunately, you're not wrong in your presumptions there. We have cases, very stark cases, such as the Cambridge Analytica scandal, that have shown the ways in which establishments will manipulate the information platforms and the hyperconnectivity that we're currently seeing via social media networks and internet connections. And unfortunately, we are seeing these forces take advantage of those platforms, and it's not helping the conspiracy theory. It's not helping us address the conspiracy theory phenomenon at all.
And this is a global thing, isn't it? I mean, we've just seen the United States go through things like QAnon and all these, President Trump talking about these elections being stolen and people genuinely believing it. What is it about the human psyche that we tend to want to accept some of these things with very little evidence?
It's a very good question, and I think that we'll still see further research, specifically from the psychological field, to give us more answers in this direction. But currently, what we are seeing from the research that has been done is that the conspiracy theory approach and the attraction to conspiracy theories is that they do tend to address themselves to anxieties and to a sense of overwhelm, which is perfectly understandable in times of massive shifts and uncertainty. But what these conspiracy theories do is offer simple answers to complex questions. They offer an instant gratification approach to otherwise complicated issues, and therefore offer some kind of comfort to various individuals, when really what we need to be building within ourselves in terms of a capability is a comfort with uncertainty. And from the futures thinking field, from a future studies and futures research perspective, being comfortable with uncertainty and with the unknown is an important capability that helps us also ask the right questions in order to align ourselves better in terms of the uncertainties we may face.
We talk about transparency, and I suppose these institutions, this could be something that they do more of with everything, and that people have access to all public information, because I guess in the end, it actually does belong to the public.
I definitely think that there is a conversation that needs to be had specifically around the pharmaceutical and vaccine industry and business in terms of how these experiments play out, who has access to the knowledge, who has access to the vaccines. I think there's very pertinent questions for us to engage with there.
And then I guess also maybe arrests of people who have been part of these scandals. If it becomes visible that if you do wrong, you will be prosecuted, people start to believe in the institutions again a little bit more.
There certainly needs to be strong action against conspiracy theories, particularly those that tend to spiral into problematic actions and that tend to trigger events that destabilize our contexts. Conspiracy theories have been shown to be quite damaging and harmful at a personal, community, and social level, and therefore strong reaction to the misinformation of the public, I think, is important.
All right, perhaps as a final thought, if you could just perhaps give us a summary in your mind of the most important aspects of what you've been finding out.
I think the most important aspects is the conspiracy theories do highlight the need for us to continue questioning the status quo and to ensure that we're not taking dominant narratives at face value. But it is important that we base our assessments and our discernments in evidence and in data in order to ensure that we're making the right decisions. Using the imagination and sensing patterns to make sense of complex environments and uncertainties as we're currently engaging in is not altogether bad, but we do need to ensure that this is informing positive actions that build us towards more sustainable futures rather than actions that destabilize our societies and that can be a danger from personal to collective levels.
Yeah, and I guess not to believe everything you read on Twitter, even if it's got a sexy hashtag.
Exactly. I think we definitely need to ensure that we're doing our critical analysis and fact-checking ourselves.
Thank you so much indeed for your time, Dr. Mwagiru. All right, and that's where we'll leave that conversation. Fascinating, isn't it? And for some reason, we do buy into these conspiracy theories. As Dr. Mwagiru was saying, I think sometimes they offer easy explanations for complex issues, and therein lies the danger.